Hello everybody and welcome back to the Petri Dish. We are in Chicago at VeeamON and I am hanging out with Eric. And Eric, why are you in Chicago at VeeamON?
Well, I'm with Green Cloud Technologies. We are a channel-focused cloud reseller. We have a large base of Veeam customers. We make the show every year, and it's really just to get out and talk to everybody and see what's going on.
Very cool. So let's dive in there. So cloud reseller. So are you guys AWS, Azure? Can you talk about what you're reselling?
So from a technology standpoint, obviously we're very similar. We are a infrastructure company.
Okay.
So much like Azure and AWS, you basically rent resources out of our data centers all over the country. The main difference is we sell our products through IT professionals throughout the country who have the relationship with the end customer. So we're providing services to make the cloud services more consumable versus just selling the infrastructure.
Gotcha. And so what brings you to, are you here at VeeamON just kind of talking about what you guys are selling, or do you guys integrate with Veeam, or how does that all?
We do. So we're one of Veeam's platinum partners for their Cloud Connect service, which is an offsite backup solution, where if you're using Veeam today, you can use our data centers as an offsite repository to send your data for a 3-2-1 type strategy to get your data offsite. We also use Veeam internally for our infrastructure for backups for machines that are hosted with us. And we are about to roll out products for backing up Office 365 and other components like that with Veeam as well. So we're very heavily partnered with Veeam.
Gotcha. And so let's talk about the data centers, because I love data centers, but I'm also, not to draw a pun, but a little green in them.
Sure.
And so where are your data centers located? How many of you guys, how does that whole operation work for you all?
Sure. So we have data center facilities across the country.
Okay.
We are based out of Greenville, South Carolina. So that's part of the reason our name is Green Cloud. One of our facilities there is in Greenville, South Carolina. That was our first site. We then have Nashville, Tennessee, Atlanta, Georgia, Houston, Texas, Phoenix, Arizona, and we just announced and opened our Minneapolis, Minnesota data center.
Okay.
And so we can sell services out of all of our services out of any of those sites. Customers can have geographically redundant services where you have something in Atlanta, something in Phoenix.
Yep.
You can have your production in one site and your disaster recovery in another. So that's really our footprint. We keep expanding our footprint over time as we grow our partner base, and you'll be seeing announcements this year and next year about new sites, new products, things like that.
And so what do you guys consider your competitive advantage? Obviously there's a lot of cloud storage services and all that, but if you guys have multiple sites, you're clearly doing something well if you're still building out new data centers. So what is your competitive advantage? What's your pitch about why somebody should come to you guys?
So really it's the partnership level we provide with the managed service providers and VARs we work with to do more than just sell a product.
Okay.
We're selling services on top of that, like I said at the top of the conversation, to make the cloud services more consumable. We don't want to just sell an infrastructure product and then you have to figure out the technology and figure out how to move your environment from on-premise to us. We actually have services that will help you move from your premise environment to us, or move from Azure or AWS to us. And we use technologies that are familiar to small, medium business and enterprises like VMware and Veeam. Nothing proprietary. It's meant to be something you're familiar with. And again, our differentiator is we're easier to consume, we're more involved with the process, we're a partner, not just a vendor.
Sure. This is going to be the wrong term, but it almost sounds like you're more like boutique cloud, because you guys have that really hands-on kind of customized approach, as opposed to here's a big box and just do whatever you want. We will help you through it.
Correct. So not only our products and the way we operate, the partners that sell our service are adding their boutique services on top, so that you really get a customized solution that isn't just, hey, we got some servers in the cloud. It's actually solving problems.
Sure. No, I find this honestly very interesting, because it's when we think of cloud, obviously there's AWS and Microsoft and Google, but clearly you guys are running around doing good things, because I know how much it costs to build out even a small data center. It's a significant capital expense, and the fact that you guys have multiple, and now you're expanding, I was going to say more vertically, but it's literally more more north up into
Right.
Minneapolis. You
Yep.
guys have a pretty wide footprint, to be honest.
Right. Yeah, and our intent is to have a really ubiquitous footprint across the U.S. before we even consider
Sure.
going anywhere else. So we want to be, remain good at what we're good at and not spread ourselves too thin. And that's why you've seen us expand from the southeast kind of out
Right.
as our base has grown. And that's continuing to be our plan. We're going to focus on what we're good at. We're not going to try to be everything to everybody.
Sure.
Um,
It's a dangerous.
yeah.
It's honestly a very dangerous strategy.
And I think that's how we've been successful. Is we've stayed focused on what we're good at. We've helped our partners, again, consume cloud
Yeah.
when they couldn't before, using what are honestly way more complex scenarios like Azure and AWS. And we don't see changing. We're just going to do
Yeah.
more of that and layer on products that make sense.
And so, how do you guys think about, like, talk to me about your customers. Who is the ideal Green Cloud customer? Is it the small, medium business? Are you guys looking at enterprise? Where do you feel like your sales pipeline kind of works its way?
I mean, it really runs the gambit. We
Really?
don't have a market that we only focus in this area. Honestly, the small medium is probably the larger portion of
Sure.
our base, but we also have a lot of really large enterprise customers as well. Our business model and our delivery mechanism tends to work in the small medium space where there needs to be more of the services and more
Yeah.
of the assistance, but our technology absolutely handles the higher scale and enterprise scale too.
Yeah. And can you talk about the trends you're seeing? Because I was in Seattle last week at Microsoft's conference, and they love to tell you that the cloud is the only thing in the world.
Right.
But I know that on-prem spend is still significantly higher than cloud for this
Sure.
time being. What are you seeing in the industry?
So yeah, along those lines, we're seeing the same thing. We started this company 7 years ago,
Okay.
and obviously we were all very enthusiastic about the idea that we're going to get everybody to move all the
Sure.
premise stuff over because they want to, and they want to get rid of all that management overhead. Instead, what we've seen for 7 years is people want to consume the cloud, but they also like the comfort of having things locally still.
Right.
The stability of continuing to use the tools they're used to and not having to change to a SaaS product or whatever
Right.
the case may be. And we've seen a shift in that somewhat over time where people are more comfortable with moving more of their business. But that's why we have the DR services and the
Sure.
backup services so that you can still keep, running what you're comfortable with and augment it with cloud services, not replace it with cloud services. So
Gotcha.
that's the trend we continue to see is an augmentation, not a replacement in the cloud space.
Augmentation, not a replacement. Interesting. And so, do you see? To me, it seems like if a new company is coming online, and I'll be curious just your opinion. It almost seems natural that you would just go all cloud.
Right.
Do you see many new companies being birthed on-prem anymore?
Certainly that scenario, a greenfield environment, we don't see it nearly as much premise.
Yeah.
Because you can start from scratch. You don't have any
Right.
legacy baggage that you've got to accommodate. So yeah, that's a market where we see a lot of initial SaaS utilization from the beginning. But there's always this one area where there's not yet a good niche product in the SaaS space where
Sure.
you have to have a premise server still. You still need a file server in a lot of
Yep.
cases. You still need, something that solves this one niche case within your overall business model. But yeah, absolutely. Greenfield is where we've seen way more adoption of cloud native.
Makes sense.
But as we all know, there's still, I say it all the time, there's millions of legacy workloads for the companies that are already out there, and somebody has to help with those.
yeah, and all you got to do is just look around at these booths about
Right.
who's still in business and who's still growing,
Right.
and you totally go that way. Question for you. Talk to me about compliance, because that's a big issue with things in the cloud. You've got
Sure.
financially sensitive data, you've got HIPAA data. How do you all work with that?
So obviously, you're absolutely right. It's no longer something only large corporations or specific verticals have to worry about. It's really something everybody has to worry
Right.
about now. So we have a whole group within our organization that's spending time on. We're constantly under audit. We're
Yeah.
constantly having our practices evaluated. So what we do is all of our data centers are SOC 2, Type 2,
Okay.
ISO 27001. We try to follow industry standards
Sure.
to give our customers a good baseline to build their compliance practice off of. Because at the end of the day, a data center provider or a cloud provider can only do so much. There's still responsibilities that the end customer has to make sure their practices are compliant and their processes and products are compliant as well. But we do everything we can up to our layer of delivering the service to make sure we're compliant. It's a daily thing. We don't, we don't just think about it once a year when we get audited. It's part of our core business, and it has to be a part of everybody's these days. You can't have compliance and security and those things be an afterthought anymore.
No,
just ask a lot of the high-profile City of Atlanta, Boeing, things like that have happened that everybody sees. That's not going away, and that's
it's definitely not.
That's not something that just large enterprises are subject to. Local retail shop has the same concerns.
Yep. Well, not necessarily directly impacting the U.S. We all know about GDPR. It's coming up, and everybody knows that we're all waiting for that first customer to get dinged by it, because it's going to be it's going to define the whole practice essentially about what are the standards. We all read the legislation, but nobody knows what it is, and we're all hoping that it's not our butts that gets nailed.
Right.
It's going to be somebody.
Right. Well, and to me, GDPR is the latest in a long line of regulation trying to get people to focus on this. It has to be, like I said, your customer's privacy, your stewardship of data. That's an important part of what you do. It's not just selling your product. That is now part of the reality of having a business. And like I said, GDPR is the latest in a series that is really, mandating that people pay attention to this.
Yeah,
and even though it's a European standard, like you said, it's going to affect the world. I mean, we're all a global economy. There's no way that it's a regional regulation anymore. It affects everybody. So you're absolutely right. But to me, even without GDPR, these problems still exist, and people are going to get dinged by it, whether it was you broke a regulation of GDPR or it was just a breach in general.
Yeah. The interesting thing is, so we've just been talking to people throughout, obviously, the past couple days here, is that, and it's not perfect because you look at things like Atlanta, or the fact that I probably have credit protection monitoring for the next 90 years after all the breaches, is that we went through this phase of, obviously security is always an evergreen important topic, but it feels like we're starting to get into an arena where owning your data in the cloud is becoming a real thing. GDPR is obviously the most, the lightest spot or brightest spot of this, but I think we're going to start to see a lot more regulation around the globe saying, hey, if it's your data, you own it, and you need to be able to claw it back at any point, because that's sort of the next step in privacy. Because I know that there's services that I've used 5-6 years ago where I gave them a credit card number, an email address, personal information that they shouldn't, I don't need them to have anymore. And so that, for somebody like yourself, it creates an interesting scenario. For Veeam specifically, in a company that takes production back snapshots, they got to be able to claw that information back out of storage on demand, which for them, they're like, oh my God, you can imagine how that works. I imagine you guys are in a similar...
Yeah, and like as I said earlier, we're starting to get into the space along with Veeam around Office 365 backup and G Suite backup, and pulling a lot of that data out of the cloud to back it up. Now you've got multiple copies. It does become a concern of who's maintaining this data, who's protecting your data. You have to ask those questions, and that's why, like I said, you got to make sure you're working with somebody who is focused on compliance every day. It's not an afterthought where you only react when something goes wrong. It has to be, a daily battle to keep it from going wrong to begin with. And that's what I think we do a good job of course.
And so, speaking of doing a good job, if people want to get in contact with you, what's the best way to reach out to you or learn more, or what's the best path here?
Well, I like to think we're out in the market pretty heavily. A lot of these shows, you'll usually run into us. Obviously, hitting up our website, gogreencloud.com is a good place to start. Again, we sell through resellers, so most likely who you're working with today for your IT services either has a relationship with us or knows who we are. So that's our goal, is that you just go to who you already know, and they know who GreenCloud is and can bring us to the table, and that's generally the fact. But certainly welcome to come to our website, come to and see us at any of the shows we're at. We're out in the field very regularly. So
perfect. Well, very much appreciate you stopping by, just kind of filling us in on what's going on in your industry. And folks, that wraps it up for today for another edition of the Petri Dish. Make sure to check out Petri.com for all the latest information. Thanks for stopping by.